Let's get it. All right, Katie Korsyn. Hello. Thank you for being here.
Hey,
What's going on? How you feeling?
thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Cool. As am I. First I have to say the background looks immaculate. Um, Guatemala
Come to
looks
Guatemala.
beautiful. Maybe one day when my finances are a little bit more stable and comfortable, I'll definitely make that trip. I'm very interested in Guatemala actually, which we will talk about. But I want to talk about you because your story, you're very interesting to me. You are the first guest on this podcast that isn't like a close friend of mine that I haven't like hung out with. Like we went to the same middle school together, Masterman. Never spent any time together, whatever. But somehow the universe we connected via Instagram. I don't even know how, but I do know that you live in Guatemala and that you started your own school in Guatemala, which is very interesting, super brave to me. So I want to hear all about that. I want to hear about everything, all about your life. So my first question for you is, could you just tell me about Sueños, the school that you started and you are the director of?
Yeah, sure. So Sueños started out because there's a lot of pieces to it. When I came to Guatemala 8 years ago, I had a friend who was starting to organize something like very organically. And he basically invited me to be part of it. And that's how I met the families and the kids. Um, but the basis of it all is that we live in this very beautiful and very colonial town. So Antigua, like literally, it's called like the colonial town in Guatemala, and it has those deep roots of colonialism that we see like all throughout Latin America and other places that have been colonized. So, thanks to this friend who introduced me to this community of street vendors, I got to learn a lot more about the dynamic of being an Indigenous person living in a town that has all of these traits of colonialism.
Mm.
And it impacted me a lot and made me question a lot. Um, Something that I continue to notice is that Guatemala promotes the Indigenous culture for tourism purposes. And the lived experiences of Indigenous people couldn't be further from those promotions. Um, there is incredible violence against them. And pretty much the only space that they are occupying is through being street vendors in Antigua. Um, it's different in rural areas, but here in Antigua, where there is a lot of tourism and foreigners, um, and Guatemalans from like a higher social, what's that called, stratus. There are almost no spaces or almost no safe spaces for Indigenous people. Um, so anyway, I got presented to this community and we did dance classes in the Central Park here for 2 years. We did like Latin rhythms,
Oh,
dance classes. I was getting super into salsa at the time. I really like when I moved here, it was like my goal to really do salsa, like really learn. Um, so I started just sharing that with the kids that at that time were working in the park or were like with their parents who were working there as street vendors. And then over those 2 years, I got to learn a lot about the community and meet a lot of the parents and the kids. And we just like slowly over time formalized and did a little bit more every year. So at first we were this dance program and we turned into an after school program. And we did that for multiple years up until 2020. And we got like our legal status as a nonprofit organization, and we set up like a branch of the organization in the US to do fundraising. And then this year, because of COVID, I guess last year because of COVID, we decided to become a school, which actually was not ever in the original plans for Sueños. We, as an after school program, always thought that we would have this more like extracurricular out of school time focus. But through the pandemic, again, we saw those like just huge differences in, I mean, it's been in the whole country where students in rural communities especially had no access to education. But especially with the students that we're working with here, that was the case. 95% of our students didn't have contact with a teacher in 2020 after the pandemic started. So that's how we ended up moving towards a school model. And that's where we are today.
Wow. That's a noble endeavor that you're undergoing. And you kind of answered my next question, which is going to be like, what made you want to start a school? But it kind of just organically happened, as it seems. You just kind of saw something that needed to be fixed, and you wanted to kind of make that difference. And it sounded like it came within like a connection with these people, with these children. That's really cool. So I guess my next question is like, what was like the feeling of like, okay, I'm about to start a school. Like I'm about to become a director of a whole school. And like just like feeling that and then stepping into actually doing that. Like what was that like? Because that's huge for me.
So I guess that piece of it's kind of still hitting me now. Like we've been in classes now for like 7 months as a school. And I guess the good thing, I would say almost about all of the steps that we've taken as Sueños is that like it's not just me. I've always had an amazing team of Guatemalans around me. And it always feels, and I know we talked a little bit about like process, but it always feels like incredibly intuitive to make decisions together. Like it doesn't ever feel like we're like going out on a ledge or like pushing something. So again, like we didn't expect to become a school, but the decision just felt like it like kind of had to be made. But I think the nice thing is that the dynamic for most of us hasn't really changed. Like the work that we were doing before is so similar to what we're doing now. One of the only differences is that the kids are getting like a diploma at the end of the year and they're gonna get to pass on to the next grade. And of course, like getting to see their education be aligned with like who they are as people and skills that they actually need for their lives is something that we have really wanted always. So now that it's part of like this piece of their formal education is really helpful for us and has also been super helpful in really like strengthening the relationships that we have with parents. Since a lot of our kids are working alongside their families to support the family economically, it was difficult to have especially parent participation, but also sometimes students participating in addition to doing their school. So in prior years, kids would be at school in the morning. Here in Guatemala, they get out around noon. And then in the afternoons, we would have programs for them. But sometimes it was really difficult for the family to make that a priority because they also have this economic priority, right, to sustain their family. So becoming the school really helped us to like fulfill something that parents really saw as a need and respond to like the needs that we've been able to see in kids.
Whew. Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. Okay, so my next question is like, so I worked with children back in my day. I worked at an after-school program. I coached basketball, and my experiences working with kids was that it was like my favorite job I think I've ever had. Like I just really enjoyed like having the connection with these children, just these free, innocent, and I definitely have like a childlike spirit when it comes to like playing and interacting. So like we just like I just clicked with so many of these kids. It made like really meaningful relationships. And I just remember like leaving work, like feeling like, wow, that was fun. Like I had a great day at work. It was exhausting, of course. But like, can you tell me a little bit about like maybe the impact or like the feeling of like really making a connection with these children and realizing like, oh, I'm helping them or I'm trying my best to help them, but also I'm like building these like important interactions or friendships for me and or for you and for them. Can you get into that a little bit? That made any sense?
Sure, yeah. That what you just told reminded me that this like interesting piece of my life. So I went to Abington Friends School when I was little, and I could talk about that too all day. Like I think that their methodology is super interesting, and we model a lot of stuff off of what I experienced as a kid. But in fourth grade, we must have had like a graduation ceremony or something. I was leaving to go to Masterman, and they gave us all these awards based on like our personalities or things that we were interested in. And the word that they gave me was dances with children.
Wow. Interesting.
So I was like 10. So when I started Sueños, I was like, oh my God, this is like
Full
exactly
circle.
what they predicted. Yeah.
Uh,
I was like, how did they know? But I guess, yes, like throughout my whole life, I've always been really drawn to working with kids, like from a really young age. Even before that, when I was like 8 and 9, I used to go and volunteer in my preschool. That was like my
wow.
favorite thing. Yeah. Super drawn to kids. This is very personal. I think I secretly wanted a little sibling and I didn't get one. And it sent me on this kid and baby focused journey for sure.
Wow.
And I like, as an adult, also worked as a nanny. And yeah, I've kind of always been working with kids. With Sueños, like I guess I can say that, I didn't think when I was meeting the kids and the families that like we would become an organization, right? It was like friendships really at first. And it's been a kind of interesting journey because a lot of the relationships started out like between me or like another volunteer and like a child. And then we got to this point where we like really needed to work on having relationships with parents too. And it was like, well, this is like a different thing. Um, but yeah, I've always loved working with kids. Something that I have noticed is that I spend like almost all of my social energy on Sueños and like the relationships there. And that's something that now that it's become my job, I have to also like work on and figure out because I also need friendships outside of work. But
All right, gotta find that balance.
yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, that's amazing. I wanna hear a little bit more like about the school. I think we kind of heard like
Sure.
how it started, but like literally like you wake up every day like you're a principal, like you're Miss Neff, shall we say?
No,
Like not.
it's not quite like that.
I mean, I
Let
want
me
to like
explain a little
like,
more.
okay, your school is definitely different from the traditional school. I want to hear about like, give me
Right.
the run through of what your school is like.
Sure. So I guess the backbone of what we're doing is called community centered education. And
Mm,
that has these 5 elements to it, which we define as including all of the languages that are present in the community in the classroom. That's super important for us because the indigenous languages are often not present in education in Guatemala, which means that kids, when they get to school, on top of like experiencing everything that happens when you go to school for the first time, they're also getting everything in a second language that they may
mhm.
have had very little contact with. Um, so that's something that's super important to us. We have in every classroom, we have a teacher who has a background in education, and we have a community member whose job is to work alongside the teacher and to make the classroom bilingual.
Wow.
So that's one of the pieces. Another one of the pieces of community-centered education for us is that learning is literally exploring issues that are relevant in the community. So we have 4 modules in the year, and every one of those modules explores a project that's related to like a real issue in the community. So like right now, one of the projects that they're working on is about La Llorona, uh, which you may have heard of. It's like a leyenda, what's that called? A legend in Guatemala about like a scary woman who has lost her children, like her children have been killed, and she is like a ghost who haunts people. But there is also a movie that just came out by Jairo Bustamante, who is a very famous Guatemalan filmmaker. And it's not only about La Llorona as like this scary legend, but it sort of plants her within the history of Guatemala and the Civil War. So the kids right now are looking at that. they're looking at like literature about La Llorona, and they're kind of making connections between the Civil War and some of their own lived experiences. So that was part 2. There are 5. So 3, the third part of community-centered education is representation. So that is something that we're focusing more and more on as we're growing. Only as of last year did we have community members working like on the staff of Sueños, and we hope that as we continue to grow, we'll have more and more. But we need to make sure that there are people who come from the same community as our kids that are leading the organization. What else? So decision making is also a piece of that. That's number 4. Decision making, decisions within the organization need to be made with the input of community members. And the fifth piece is that everything that we do in terms of education needs to have a connection to students' daily lived experiences. Like something that we see so often, or we saw when our kids were in public school, is that they'd have like these awful math grades, and then they're like out working and they can do these incredible, like they can calculate like a conversion between quetzales and dollars, like boom. Yeah. So we need to make sure now at Sueños that we're able to make those connections for students, and that they feel like what they're learning is relevant, and also that their experiences outside of school are relevant in the classroom.
Well, goddamn. I want to say congratulations and thank you. That seems like you're creating a school that actually cares about the children, and like is very thoughtful in the process of like helping them navigate their lives, which I think is not the case where we're from in Philly. So I think that's really like super powerful. I think you need to give like a TED talk or whatever is like hot these days. Cause I really think that like I forget what you call it, but the community-based aspect is like one of the most important parts of learning that we've totally just thrown out the window. Like, and we can get into all types of things, but it's like, history for the past thousands of years, everything was learned in a small community, these indigenous communities where you had your mom, your dad, your aunt, your grandfather, your grandpa, all these like this 25 people all looking after you. So it was a lot less hassle for just the mom and the dad or just the teacher. And I think, we've moved away from like our schooling system, which I'm sure is just flat out a failure. And like, what's the word? Inspiring a child to like follow their heart or to help them like have any sort of strong foundation. And I think you talked about you went to Friends school. I'll talk a little bit more, but I want to hear more about you. I worked at a Friends school, and I worked at a Friends school, Green Street Friends, and I worked at a charter school. And like the differences were like unbelievable. Like the Friends school, it's like first, obviously it starts with the family. Like all the parents care. The parents are there interacting with the students. It's a community. The kids feel safe. The charter school was more like, they just like threw me in there, like old books, no, no like prior information. Like literally, like I was told I was going to be the English and social studies teacher. And then my first day I arrived and the other teacher's like, okay, so first period is math. And I'm like, what? I'm like, like, like that's what's going on in these schools. It's like people are just getting thrown into the
Right.
fire, but there is like, there needs to be a wave, and hopefully there is a greater wave of like moving towards what you're doing. I think it's really incredible. I think you are making a huge impact on these kids' lives, and I hope that like just by like the votes of people seeing this more, what you're doing is more effective, that more people start coming, and then you can help other people kind of start these things. Cause like just hearing you speak, like I would have loved to go to that school. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I'm sure like these
The
kids are
kids
having,
actually, when they go on vacation, they are like texting me and like calling to see when we're gonna go back to school.
bro, you getting text from the kids. Like that's next level shit right there. And yeah, I think that's how like we need to heal and build a better world, is like children have to want to be in school. They have to enjoy it. And that's so cool that you are doing this. Yeah, keep going strong. Like just, and thank you. Like this is like, I'm like a little like, I don't, I'm everywhere because like it's so amazing what you're doing. Like I feel like bad schools have just impacted like so many people, and like
Right.
just God bless you.
Yeah.
God bless you. Um
I sorry, just to
oh, no,
go
no,
off
no,
of
no.
that a little bit.
Yeah, go
Like
ahead.
most of my experiences in education have been here in Guatemala, and I mean, I think what you're saying is really similar to what's going on here, where kids just don't get to show up to school as themselves. I think that's like kind of the heart of the issue. And I've been really lucky to have some incredible mentors that I've worked with who are like experts in education. One of them is Denise Aleman, who like pretty much picked me up. I was a teacher when I met her here, and she would come into my class every single day to help me. That was her job, to train the teachers.
Mm.
And it was terrifying for me for her to come into the classroom. I had no idea. I was working with 3 and 4-year-olds. It was my second year teaching. I had no idea what I was doing. And she would like just come in every single day. um, and then like took me under her wing and hired me. And I got to work with her now with like, we've worked with projects with the Guatemalan government. We've worked with other nonprofits. We've worked with also with private schools. And I think she has been one of the people who has shown me like the importance of connecting like context, basically like what a student's life to education. And then another one is Chad McGlone, who runs this organization called Teachers to Teachers, where I worked for a bit. And he also, their focus was math, and he just like blew my mind with how we can actually make math relevant for kids. And like at Masterman, I remember that in high school, I ended up taking like all these years of math. I was like in advanced math, and I like did not care about taking math, but I ended up taking like Calc BC. Like, why? And
Thanks.
now that I've seen like how relevant math is in our lives, I really wish that, you know, that idea would have been in our classroom too. Like, I wish that I would have learned math in context. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm just like trying to like fathom the experience of like being in Guatemala and just creating a whole school. Super cool. I do want to talk about like, so there's a stigma around the world of like white people, or in your case, white women, moving to a place with Black and brown people, and like you're starting a school. It's like, oh, you're trying to like this savior complex. You're trying to, who do you think you are, trying to start a school
Yeah.
in Guatemala? Like, get the fuck out of here. Have you like
Yeah.
come up against that, and like how do you, have you internalized that? What's your experience been with, like with that?
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, I think that's a really important question to ask. So thank you for asking that. And I think so in college I studied development, and they like kind of told us from the outset like development is like kind of messed up, like most of this fails, like
Um,
it's pretty colonialist. But also like here's your degree in it, like go out into the world. um so I kind of like when I came here, I kind of knew that, but of course people of color have really like given us this gift in the past few years of being incredibly vocal and pointing out these things that like as white people we've just been like turning off our vision to, right? Because of this incredible privilege that we have. And look, like I live a life of incredible privilege. And like, if not more than when I was living in the US, like probably more being here in Guatemala where society is like incredibly divided. Um, White people kind of just, you arrive here with an incredible amount of privilege. So yeah, um, I think we have to think about this stuff as white people because it's not anyone else's job to deconstruct it for us. Like we have all this privilege and we also have all this responsibility if we want the world to be a little bit better than the way that we found it. We have to look at ourselves and say like, how am I benefiting from this, and how is it hurting others? um, and I think that like my experience as a teacher has really helped me to just know that my job like almost 90% of the time is as a listener. Like there's this 10% of the time where I'm taking action, but like it always has to be based on things that I listen to. Like I can't just come into a community and say like, oh, let me tell you what the community needs, right? That doesn't make any sense. Um, and we've seen these incredible shifts happen by having people from the community that we serve on our staff. So that's also been incredibly helpful for me to learn more about like there's so much more work that we have to do also, like we're not there, like you know. Yeah, I think there's just a lot more to do. And also like thank you to all of the BIPOC who are really like making an effort to do like this really difficult emotional work to explain to white people what's wrong, because that shouldn't be on them. And yet they're like doing all of this internal effort to help privileged people make those changes. So we like literally just need to listen and take action.
wow. Yeah, it's white privilege. It's a difficult subject to talk about. To be totally honest, it seems like there's like so many aspects, and it's hard to like come to some like cohesive like this is what it is and this is what it needs to be. But
Yeah.
I really liked everything you said, and it's just like yeah, having like an open mind to accept and to listen to what the experiences of other people, and then to to go inside and try to do that self work. That and really one thing I thought of is like it's also helping you a lot. Like it's helping you like with your energy and the way that like engaging from a place of like positive intentions and love and care and all of these things. It's like it seemed like we've put everything on the external aspect where it's like yes, white people are privileged in all these types of ways outwardly, but also like that creates a lot of like internal strife. And like people never really think about the fact that it's like I maybe you can or cannot attest to this, but like you doing the work of trying to understand your privilege and use that understanding to then go create something for these children who maybe are underprivileged or whatever you call it. That's also helping you. Like that's helping you
Yeah.
heal yourself, which is something that like, is missed, isn't talked about. It's all about like, I don't know, money and status, which hopefully that's like diminishing a little bit. It's hard to kind of tell. But yeah, that's that's an interesting thing. Have you ever like had anyone be like get out of here, white lady, you don't know what you're talking about? Or has it always kind of just like, it's always, I don't know, been mostly like people's, I feel like, I mean, for me, you have like an energy of like a very, like you're trying to help. You have a good energy. It doesn't seem like you have any like ulterior motives. Like I try to base a lot of stuff off energy, but I feel like maybe the people of Guatemala who you're trying to help can feel that, and then you guys connect in that way. Or has there any been like don't trust this white lady? I don't know.
So that's actually a really interesting question. Within the community that we work with, there is like a lot of what's the word for that? People are very accepting of extranjeros, people from outside of the country, foreigners, because they all work in tourism, right? They like their job is about selling to tourists. So most people in our community have had many superficial experiences with foreigners that have been positive. So I haven't ever, like, there hasn't really been resistance in that sense. On a deeper level, yes. On a deeper level, like I was saying kind of at the beginning, there aren't many safe spaces for Indigenous people in the city that we live in, at least, and maybe the country. And that definitely has contributed to there being a lot of mistrust. So something that we, like, an example of what that looks like in my life is that if a parent is going through something difficult in our community, they might not tell me, but they might tell one of our staff that's from the community instead. Yeah, that's what that looks like.
Right, that makes sense. And yeah, I've lived in other places like and I think that's just a universal issue. Like one thing that immediately came to my mind is like, so I spent a year and a half in Thailand, and they call it the land of smiles. And like, outwardly, their economy is totally based on tourism. So they have to have these good interactions with foreigners. But it does feel very superficial. And it is like a known thing that it's like, it's hard for foreigners to really like become friends with Thai people on like a deeper level. It's like, there's always
Right.
like you're a foreigner, you kind of have this like outside taking like that. The connection between foreigners and Thailand is like a deep issue, but also like in Ecuador. So I spent 2 months at this small town called Vilcabamba. And it was a town where it was like maybe like 30, 40 years ago. It was just like small town. No one's ever heard of it. It's in the Andes. It's absolutely beautiful, but all Ecuadorians. And like I've heard different stories of like most like small, simple town. But then someone else also said that it was like Venezuela is now, which means it's like very, very, very poor, like just a struggling economy. And then like I think some foreigner from Spain found it, and now fast forward 30 years later, it's this place where like there's foreigners from all over the world, like Germany, Spain, America, Canada, and they build these nice houses in the hills. And there's this weird division where there's like,
Yeah.
my girlfriend who's fluent in Spanish, would talk to the taxi drivers and like get all the scoop of what was going on. And like there's some people, specifically one plumber, who's like was so grateful for the tourists because now he has all this business, and literally he's surviving and feeding his family because of these foreigners. But other people
Yeah.
have had struggled immensely because now all the prices are so much higher for these
Yes.
daily basic goods. Like people who've lived there their whole lives can't really afford to live there. So now they're being priced out and they're
Right.
having to move. And like one of the taxi drivers really said, like, he was like, but one thing he said before the foreigners came, it was just like the whole town was like a family. Like if I wanted to build a house, I called my friends, we built a house. It didn't worry about money. They wanted to, but it was just, we just help each other. And now everything's about money. People are more sketchy and double timing. So it's just like weird undercurrent. And like the last thing I'll say is like, I live like about 2 hours from there. And the price is so much cheaper where I am than this like foreign hub. And like it's really weird because it's like this is beautiful place, but there's also this like underlying energy of like to have to just navigate this like kind of colonial feel. And like, you do have to, like, I mean, I tried with my broken Spanish and like try to like really like connect with people on like a real, like be with their eyes, like give them all your energy, try to show them that you're not like a dickhead foreigner and that you like a
Yeah.
compassionate person. And but there's definitely the mistrust. So it's real. I guess I want to talk a little bit about like, so you talked about like what like an indigenous person's life is. And I kind of want to hear more about that. Like maybe you could speak like a specific child or like what are these children's lives from these indigenous communities who are now selling, trying to survive? Like what does that look like from your perspective?
Sure. I guess I'll always start out by saying that like it would always be best to hear from them directly, right?
It's not
Not just
that.
like an outside voice.
Right, right,
But so something that came up when you were talking about what you experienced in Ecuador is also that the families that we work with mostly are not from the Antigua area or like the department that Antigua's in, and they come from mostly from 3 other departments that are like in the highlands of Guatemala that are rural areas. So it's interesting because they also come to Antigua because there's an economic opportunity there for their family.
of course.
Um, there's just an incredible amount of racism in Guatemala and in Antigua. So, like, what are ways that we see that? Most families don't feel comfortable going to any institutions. They don't feel comfortable going to the hospital or the doctor's office. Um, they prefer to practice traditional ways of medicine, but also there's like a fear attached to going to any type of institution based on these very specific experiences that like at this point we've gotten to see, where people will like not attend to them or frighten them or not provide a translator. That's like the issue everywhere we go. When there are legal issues, people are also not willing to go to institutions to protect themselves often. Similarly with the schools, so families know that they will like there's this potential that if they don't send their kids to school, the state can remove the kids from the family. But the relationship between the schools and the families have been really difficult because of this element of language. So like language pops up almost everywhere since we're in a region that, first of all, in Antigua, there are not many speakers of indigenous languages. And then on top of that, the indigenous language that our families speak is Quiche, which is from a different region. So even if the court, for example, has a translator, it would be a translator of the wrong language. It would be a translator of a language called Cachiquel, which is not the language that the families speak. So often they get like led through these processes without really giving consent, like informed consent, because they don't speak the same language. And then they're forced into situations that they didn't know would happen or they just didn't consent to.
Right. That's an overview of the struggles. A good one. Well, unfortunately, it seems like, these issues are universal. I guess it's true. It's there are, I feel like, more people who are like have this like, I don't know, deep feeling in their pit, in the pit of their stomach, that like there's just a lot of the foundations of how our world works is unfair and corrupt. And we're trying to heal ourselves. Well, all I can say is I'm trying to heal myself so I can so hopefully make a difference. And you're definitely doing that, which again, I'm like super appreciative of you. When I found out that you started your own school, I was like, what? Like Katie Korsyn? Let's fucking go. But so I do want to pivot a little bit to like just like Guatemala, maybe your life history. We'll see what it takes us. Oh yeah, okay. So Guatemala is super interesting to me. I think it's really, really cool. And I remember like I knew I wanted to like move out of the US, and I had a couple countries. Oh, I think that maybe that's how I hit you up at first. I was thinking about like going to
Yeah, yeah.
Guatemala and potentially I was like, maybe I can get a job. Definitely chose Ecuador, as you see. But so Guatemala recently, like it's the Yucatan, and there's this rich history
Yeah.
that has been like hidden from the public, shall we
Yes.
say.
Yes.
And I learned about not too long ago how like all of these pyramidal structures are just popping up in the jungles, like these super advanced structures that they can't really call, like it's in the jungle. What is it? Who is it? How did it get here? It's not much information that people aren't really talking about it much. And you said, I think you told me when we talked is you like drove up to one. Like, tell me a little bit about like what's
Yeah.
going on with these
Just
pyramids. Like, what's happening in Guatemala? Like, these things are unsurfacing. It's crazy.
so I guess like the biggest site in the country is Tikal, which is in a place called Petén, like in the north, right on the border with Mexico. And I went there. I've gone there I think two times. But on the drive there, and also one time we were going to Belize. But like on the drive up through that northern part of the country, everything looks like it's like a pyramid or like a temple. Like everything has that shape. And you're like it's a very flat land, which is unlike the most of the country. Most of the country is mountainous, which you can keep in the background. But so yeah, this like northern part of the country is all flat, and then just as you're like looking out over the flat land, you see like all these little structures. So I won't take credit, but I said those all look like they're Mayan ruins. And then yeah, this research came out a couple years ago that they have special technology now to, I don't know if they can see it from space or whatever, but yeah, they found just like hundreds or thousands or I don't know how many more structures that are just uncovered, right? They look like little mounds of dirt, but they're underneath, they're these ancient structures. Yeah.
Ooh, well, like, give me a little bit of chills. Like,
It's so cool. It's so cool to go to a site here and see those types of ancient ruins that are so old and like imagine people being there and like I wish that I knew much more about like ancient Mayan history because again a lot of that information is like buried and then unfortunately there's like this crazy belief here that like promoted by colonialism that like ancient Mayans don't have relation to current indigenous people, which doesn't make any sense. But basically like a lot of that like crazy amazing history that like even are some things that we got to learn in school. Like I remember part of the reason probably why I'm here again in fourth grade, we did like a whole unit on Mayans. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not part of the education system here. And it's not part of like information that makes it to kids. And I have a friend here who is an anthropologist and has like friends who are doing archaeology, and the information that they learn is just so incredible, and it makes so many direct connections. Like she told me that the I guess the stelas, they're like these stone I don't really know what to call them other than that. They're these like large stones that have like carvings in them. But the stelas that they've found at some of these sites have like the same patterns that women wear on their huipiles, like their woven clothing.
Whoa.
And I'm like, like that would be so cool for a kid to learn about, like, because a lot of kids make their own huipiles, or they see their moms making them, and like knowing that that history is coming back from like so
Cool.
many years ago. But basically, like what I've seen at this point is that I guess like a lot of the funding for archaeologists and anthropologists, like they're mostly people coming from like US universities, and they do these amazing research projects and they take it back to their university. And like, I mean, I really wish that like the Ministry of Education here would make those connections, because it's just like, but there isn't a priority for that, right? There is not a priority to teach history. There is not like what we were saying before, like history here has been purposely hidden from the population, and people are like terrified about talking about the Civil War, for example.
Whoa.
So it just doesn't get shared.
That's whew, that's fascinating. Yeah, so the Mayan like culture has something that's been very like inspirational for me. Just like indigenous culture in general. I
Yeah.
definitely like took a period of my life and just like learned a lot about like the Hopi culture, Lakota, Mayans were in there. And like you said, like a lot of this history is purposely hidden, which is a shame. Maybe, you know, in the future, you can like kind of try to change that a little bit. I'm gonna give you a shout out, a nudge to say, you know, try to. I can only imagine how crazy it is to have your own school. Maybe a couple years down the line, when you try to feel a little more comfortable to maybe add
But
some.
that's not, yeah, that's not far out. Like that's
Stuff.
one of our main pieces of our work. Like we, like one of the main ejes that we call it, like axes, is self-esteem through cultural identity. So that's like
Right.
where we're at.
That's where
Or
we're going.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. And like, so like all the information that I found about the Mayan culture, it's like you can't really find any of it through any traditional means. You know, you have to go to these esoteric researchers or these spiritual
Yeah.
folks that have supposedly like had connections with these tribes. So it's like, you know, we can call it a conspiracy theory or whatever it is. But two sources of information that like, well, I guess talking one that really interests me was saying that like there were ancient, like not ancient, maybe like when Americans first came in and started like doing research, there were a lot of documents that were hidden that talked about what they found and what they saw. And these people compared the Mayan civilization to some of the greatest civilizations in the history of the world. They said it was on par or could be like more advanced than Egypt and Greece. It showed like there was incredible works of art. There were these pyramidal structures, these structures and buildings that modern man, or especially men back in like was it 1800s or whatever, could not understand, could not fathom. Um, what else did they say? They said that I guess in conversation they learned that supposedly the Mayan culture has the history of the longest stint of time without any like warfare or conflict, which was 500 years. Partially because
Wow.
they're in jungle-ish, is that a word? Whatever. Mountainous jungle is what I want to say. It's like
Yeah.
no one really could access them. So they just had these communities,
Right.
and other things they talked about was like there was no remnants of any jail or prison system. There was no money, so it seemed to be everything was traded, and it seemed to be like there was very little sign of like even like poverty. It seemed like to be like one of like the most thriving societies that they've ever found. And these documents are totally disregarded and like hidden. And another thing I learned was that supposedly like everything. So this one guy, Drunvalo, Melchizedek, he's like, there's a lot of controversy around him, whatever. But he spent like 30 years, like pretty much living with different indigenous communities in New Mexico, Guatemala. And he talked to this supposedly one of the leaders of a Mayan indigenous group in Guatemala. And he said that everything that like they say about our culture is totally BS because we never told them. Like they never like came to us, and like we have a lot of historical, like we have all the receipts of like what happened, and we still hold like there's all these obviously shamanic, ancient, community-based ritual traditions that exist, and that like what we're told is like that, like from the colonial perspective, the outsider, like, oh, that's interesting, what is that, blase blase. So like just like learning these things and like saying like, oh, it was possible, we're told that there's always war, there's always death, there's always, and then like just hearing like, well, according to this history, which could be incorrect or correct, there's a 500-year stretch of peace and prosperity, which you'll never hear about. And that like fascinating. And for that to like a lot of like Guatemala just seems to be the center of a lot of like mystical tradition that
Yes.
is
Yeah.
not like is like sealed tight in that area. And I guess a question is like, how does that, it seems like it really doesn't much, but does that ever like seep out into like in any type of way, or is it like kind of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, so like what that's making me think about a little bit is kind of like these dualities, like the community we work with. Like I said, in terms of medicine, for example, like people tend to practice like natural, they call it like natural medicine, or like sobar, like if something on you is like hurt, like there's a person who will come and like sobar you, but it's like a ceremony type thing. But there's also like on the flip side, there's like prejudice within the community about that being like brujeria. Like thanks to Christianity, unfortunately, things have like been fused, right? Like in all of Latin America, like indigenous beliefs and Christian beliefs. And then like within that, there's like this duality of like, this is our way, like this is what we practice. And then also like, this might be dangerous, this might be brujeria, like this might be bad. But it's really cool, like the practices that have survived. I think you're right about like I'm feeling your energy, like feeling connected to those possibilities and that type of energy that's like survived history. And I think that yeah, people are still practicing, like people are still living those ways, but then there's like all these layers of society asking like, what is that, right?
all right, wow, well, I don't know, much power and love to all the people who are like still, to everyone, why not, but specifically like
Yeah.
to know indigenous people who are still thriving and are still trying their best to just like push back against the conglomerate. um yeah, I guess what I'll say can lead into that pretty good. So yeah, so Ecuador is a pretty cool place because I think with it's Bolivia and Ecuador where it's the highest population of indigenous people still like alive in the country. And in Ecuador specifically is like transnational corporations devastated like large swaths of the Amazon. in like from the 70s, 80s, 90s. And like eventually like they just like started pushing the fuck back. And like they started organizing, they started partnering with each other, partnering with outside like pretty much older white folks who like saw these horrors and actually wanted to help, and like learning about the system, learning about lawyers, learning what they could do. And like there has been some sort of shift away from just like these companies are totally dominating the whole society. And still it's like, you know, who knows how much of a change has been made, because like Ecuador still uses the American dollar, which is like weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like they're just like,
Yeah.
oh, get rid
Yeah.
of that. Like just it'll be easier. Just use this. Like it's still that vein is in there, but like the pushback in Ecuador specifically has been very strong. And which is like, you know, actually like we have this guy who works on our neighbor's yard, and he comes and he talks to Tamar. He talks to me too, which is good. Like I practice Spanish with him, but he like really talks to Tamar. And like she says, he always brings up corruption, like corruption, corruption, corruption,
Yes.
which is like,
Yeah.
you know, worldwide. But like as far as like what I've learned and read is that like Ecuador is actually one of the like the most thriving countries in South America right now. Like people are coming from Peru, Colombia, Brazil to be in
Yeah.
Ecuador to like, so it's cool that
Yeah.
like like, you know, they show the indigenous people like banded together to a certain extent and kind of like made a better, like forced the government to like give them a better slice of the pie, which is cool. Still tough. Like one quick more story is that like my landlord is a farmer, and like he has cows and horses and all types of things, land, and he has all this corn in the backyard, right? And this is his 6th year. It's like insane amount of corn. And I helped him process it a little bit. It was like fun. That's a whole nother thing. But like, so it's so much time and effort. Like he hired all these people to get the corn, this big machine, and he did all this work, and he ended up losing money just because these like mega corporations process this corn so cheap. They sell it for so cheap. It's so hard. And like just like I saw him. He arrived 6:30, worked his ass off to lose money, and then like the next day he showed up and he was just like wasted drunk. And it was like because he just lost. It was like kind of sad. But it's like
Yeah.
these bad, like this shit is real that no one really sees. Like all of these people all over the world are struggling, and
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's like it's unfathomable, really. But you know, just for you to like take to put your foot in the sand and to make an impact how you can, I think is really powerful. Like I commend you a million times over. I'm trying to like I have and I'm trying to continue like on a similar path that you're on. But I guess like somehow that leads me to like, so this like I was reading about um history, kind of like South American history, and there's this whole civil war in Guatemala that like
Oh
you
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
hear anything about, but like made a massive impact. Like, I was reading about
Yeah.
people's accounts of like living in the hills of Guatemala, and it was just like what they described was like unfathomably brutal tactics that were
Yes.
like waged against seemingly like innocent people.
Yeah.
Like,
Genocide. Genocide
it was a
is what
genocide.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this is a difficult topic, but like how's that affected that society? It had to be massive. How's that affected you, the
Oh my
people?
God. Yeah.
And you said it's like trying to be hidden, of course, but like what's like speak on that to some extent. I know it's really hard. It's really hard for me. Like I don't know what the fuck to say, but it's
So there's a huge impact. Yeah, I mean, I'll say I'm probably not the best person to talk about it, like not being from here and really experiencing any of it myself.
right.
What I do know is that I have multiple friends who've lost parents in the war, or maybe grandparents, but parents still. So like it's only one generation away. And like during the war, first of all, the war happened. I hope I don't get anything wrong. Comment if I'm wrong. But basically the US government took out the Guatemalan president at the time, who was like, I guess, socialist leaning, like had policies that were aimed at helping people in the country. And I guess for the time, the US felt like, you know, as they felt with many countries, that they're like entitled to come in and take down governments and put in the type of governments that they want. So that's how the war started. And there was this element that I guess it kind of makes me sad to think about, like indigenous people like organizing and fighting back, because there, unfortunately, there wasn't like a beautiful ending to that, right? Like there was a genocide, and then the status quo kind of just stayed the same. And then on top of what already was existing, which they say in Guatemala that there's like these 5 big companies, and they're like these 5 families that literally were like colonizers in Guatemala. Like they're the people who were in power at colonization. So if you can imagine, like across hundreds of years of history, the same like 5 or 10 families have been in power. So, but yeah, like throughout this period in the 1900s, like it's like society wanted to take these steps forward, right? And then unfortunately that was just met with violence, and it doesn't feel so. There was like this whole process of peace accords that I also don't like have that much knowledge about, but in the 90s they like basically they said, okay, like this is over, but it doesn't seem like you can just end a war and never talk about it and think that there'll be any like progress for society. So I think, you know, when that happens, there's always this danger of it happening again, right? Like if you don't know your history, you're like bound to repeat it, like on a personal level, right? But as a country, I think that's one of the really scary things, is that so like people are afraid to talk about it because they've experienced that when they're active politically, they're killed. Like that's what happened during the war. So like if you had an opinion or you were like left leaning, you got murdered. So like it makes tons of sense, right? You don't want to speak up after that. And then on the side of the government, there's just like no effort to like actually make peace, like actually talk about what happened and process. And all of the history of the war, like people really don't talk about it. Like it's not something that gets talked about like in a social setting or like in a family setting. No. And it's not even called a war. It's called el conflicto interno armado, like the internal armed conflict. So it's not like technically a war even. And then there's this whole element where people don't think there was a genocide. Like there's like it hasn't, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's legally been declared a genocide. And there's like within Guatemalan society, there's this whole like 2 sides to the was there a genocide or wasn't there a genocide. Yeah.
Ooh, reality and the
Heavy,
truth is so heavy.
heavy stuff.
Heavy stuff.
Sorry if it's getting sad.
No, all right, like I don't know. I think these things need to get talked about, even if it's just, you know, in this setting. Like I don't know, it seems important. I personally have spent like a bit too much time like learning about these histories, and just like it made me so angry and so frustrated. Like very like a similar thing happened in Ecuador and in Panama. Definitely not like didn't really get to the point where there was like genocides, but it was pretty much like presidents who like actually wanted to help people, and they ended up like both of their planes mysteriously crashed, and then everything went back to
Right.
status quo. It's like this is like the
Nice.
reality of our world that like a lot of people, to go back to privilege, like a lot of people have the privilege to not have to think about. And I don't know, I think like learning about these things and talking about these things has definitely like just helped me be more like honest with myself and with like people like, oh, like if the world, like you be honest, like the world, this is what goes on. And to be able to engage from the perspective of like trying to heal from all these things instead of like just trying to like act like it doesn't help happen. I think it's
Yeah.
important. I don't know. Um, but yeah, like I feel like we can
Yeah.
like just finish up with some more positive things. Like, so you've lived in Guatemala for the past 8 years. Like
Yeah.
that's an incredible feat. Um, I guess I just don't even know how the question. Like in the past 8 years, like what are some things that some like I guess a great memory or something that you've learned, something that you've brought. Like 8 years in a foreign country is no joke, and like Guatemala's your home now. Like it's your home, right? Like
Yeah.
this is your home. Like I didn't ask you a question, but if anything, I provoked anything from that. Um, speak to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, it's been 8 years that I've been here. Um, I think something that has made me like want to connect with you is that I feel so I like really relate to this project that you have during these conversations because it can be hard, right? Sometimes it can be hard to not be home and then to kind of feel like you're like kind of not connected to that place anymore, or your connection is like kind of slowly slipping away. Um, yeah, this eighth year feels I'm feeling a little bit of that.
Mm,
I guess especially because of COVID. Like other years I've been able to go home once or twice to Philadelphia and see my family. And then this past year, like my first nephew was born and I'm here and COVID was happening and like it felt extra far. But yeah, I think it hits me all of the time. Like, you like live in Guatemala now.
uh,
It like literally all the time. I'm like surprised by it. I think that I knew that I would stay here for like some amount of time when I came here. Like I got a job when I moved here and it was for like a year and I kind of knew that I would stay past that. But I think people have kind of stopped asking me like how long I'm gonna stay here at this point because it's so permanent. But yeah, I feel definitely like I'm kind of stretched across two cultures and two countries, and I get culture shock when I go to the US for sure. I was in the US a couple weeks ago. I got to go and see
oh,
my
wow.
family, get my vaccine. Yeah, yeah. But it feels weird. It feels like I always, as soon as I always have like a, what's that called? Like an escala, a stop in like Miami or Texas or something. And it's always like I feel this huge shift as soon as I land. It's like, whoa, this is
Yeah.
the US. um, yeah. Yeah.
Yo, I mean, I like that huge shift. I definitely got to speak on because I was here for like in Ecuador for 4 or 5 months, and then I flew back, and my stop was in Atlanta, and it's like it's like it's not only America, it's the South, and like
Mhm.
you're in these airports, and I was just like, whoa, like
Yeah.
it's just on so many levels. It's like, oh man, yeah, I definitely feel that. Well, who 8 years. Yeah, it seems like I don't know. There's kind of this positive and negative dance that you're dealing with, going off energy. You know, I feel similar. You know, I think of total, I've been out of the state for like 2 years, and it's been like different places, and then I've jumped back, and I've got to see. is there any like aspect of you, like for me, I felt like, I don't know, I particularly have went through some like trauma and like issues in my life that I feel like I just really needed to heal from, and like Philly wasn't going to be the place. And like,
Yeah.
like you feel like there's been any like experiencing a different aspect of life has like, how has it brought you any, I don't know, peace, perspective, anything positive? But at the same time, before I finish, it's like I do get this loneliness where like most of, and especially for now, is like I can't really have a real conversation with anyone in Spanish at the moment. Like there's always like a word or two that's missing, and I'm like, like I can, but like, yeah. So I guess answer my question. I'm rambling.
I feel so many things just came up for me.
Okay, well,
The first piece that's coming up right now is like, it's hard for me also to like get to a deeper level with people here. I'm like fluent in Spanish, but it's still, I don't know, like I think it's been hard for me to form like deeper personal relationships. I've been really lucky that through my work, I have these really like important relationships that do get to that deeper place. But like I also said at the beginning, like I want to feel that also like on a social, like personal level. And it's been harder for me. And there are also like a lot of Americans here. And at first, when I first got here, I really felt like rejecting of that, which is so weird because I'm an American. But I like didn't want to have any like American friends. And then I walked way back on that because we have a lot of things in common. But that's something that I'm working on. Trauma. You brought up trauma. Okay.
I did, didn't I?
I mean, yeah, like, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of conceptions about why people travel. And I think like, a lot of people have this healing element to do, or that they want, or maybe they learn while they're on that journey. That's something that they are looking for. I'm not sure if that's like what my path has been. I kind of think that I ended up here because there were like all these little seeds sown for me that kind of like led me here. Like from a really young age. Like I think at AFS, like they just talked to us so much about the world and about there like being kind of more outside of the US, and like all this like richness basically that like we weren't experiencing because we were in the US. And then later on, when so Amy Cohen is like a huge piece of Sueños. She was, I don't know if you had her in middle school, but she was,
yeah, I remember this
a
Cohen.
teacher at Masterman. Yeah, so she taught us geography, and then I had her also for African American history in high school. And I feel like her also, like the experiences I had in her class were really interesting. I like, she'd been in Peace Corps and was also talking to us a lot about like just, being out of the US. And now she like founded the US branch of Sueños, and she's she's
Oh
like this
wow.
incredibly important person in my life. Yeah. 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 She's our board
Wow.
president. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's fucking cool.
And she adopted her daughter from Guatemala as well. So yeah, I felt like I had all these things drawing me here. And there was just kind of this sense of getting out of Philly for sure. Like, I remember when we went to college, I don't think I applied anywhere in Philly. Like, I was pretty sure I wanted to leave. But I mean, of course, I don't know. There has been trauma in my life. My dad passed when we were in high school. I don't know if that's something that like made me want to leave more or less. But that's absolutely been part of my healing journey. And I do feel like I've had a healing journey here. Well, it feels like that's life for me, at least, is like it's kind of all healing. And I've been really lucky to be I like worked with a coach, like a life coach, and then for the past year I've been in therapy, which it's like the first time I've really like gone into therapy, like committed to it. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I guess it's somewhat related, but I don't exactly know how yet.
And that is fair. And that is also life. I want to say side note is I was just like, I'm finally coming to terms, maybe it's the third time, that I also need therapy myself. So I'm looking for some online sources. Might holla at you on the side about
Yeah,
that. Also, I might holla
yeah,
at you.
yeah,
I sent you my friend's my resume. I don't know if you saw
yeah.
that.
I got it.
All
Yes,
right, cool,
yeah.
cool,
Thank
cool,
you so
cool,
much for
cool.
sending.
No
Yeah,
problem,
yeah,
no problem. We can talk more about that. But well, that's really cool about Amy Cohen. That's cool that like
yeah.
that's a full circle, great story. Yeah, I all I could do is just sing you praises that you're doing something that I think is really like impactful and like coming from all of my experiences going through school, being a teacher at school, that's like one of the biggest like fundamental like rots of our society that it's just these children aren't like given anywhere near of the sort of energy and resources and time that they need. So commend you a million times. Super cool to just like talk to you and hear about this. I appreciate what you said about doing this. It's like it is really like part sometimes like I'm not gonna do it anymore for a while because like life's been a little bit more hectic. But like sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this? Other times I'm like, this is fucking amazing. Like I'm learning things about people in the world that I would have never been. Just like very grateful for it. But I just wanna yeah, thank you so much. And I want to leave you with if there's like anything else you feel like maybe you would like to speak about your life, your experience, Guatemala, being a teacher, anything you got. It's like a vast thing. You know, I'm new to this. I'll just be winging it. But if you got anything, let's hear it. Um, if not, thank you so much. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say like thank you so much for opening this space, and like kind of like we were saying in the conversation, it, I really miss having these types of conversations that get to go past like our mission statement, or I don't know. Like sometimes I'm either just telling people like I'm good, or I'm like reading our mission statement, and that doesn't I have to work on that piece, but it's nice to have like a real conversation, and I hope to hear more about your life also. I know this was a little more focused on me, but I'm thankful to you for having these, and not just with me. Like I've enjoyed so much watching the other videos and feeling like I'm getting to connect with some of these people that I maybe haven't talked to. Like Dai, I haven't I haven't talked to him probably in like 20 years or something. So it's so cool to see like what's going on with him. And I think they've all been super, super interesting, and like all these connections that maybe I didn't notice that we had, or people from Masterman. Yeah, I really enjoyed listening in, and yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thank you too. I appreciate that. So what I want you to do is I want you when this thing's finished, and probably won't put it out till next week. This week's a bit crazy. But I want you to send this drawing to a few of your friends that like maybe you haven't talked to for in a while. Like they're like, you just like swing this because I feel like that's the coolest thing is like people's friends who like life is like, taking going separate ways.
Yeah.
And then to be able to like see
Oh
your
yeah.
friend is like, whoa, this is like, I want to watch this. And that's really who it's for, I guess. I don't fucking know. But so yeah, send it to your friends, some Masterman folks. This is shout out to Masterman. This is definitely a Masterman episode.
Woo.
And yeah, yo, muchas bendiciones y gracias a million times. And yeah,
Thank you so much.
let's stay in touch here and there, and definitely see what the future holds. But I'm rooting for you, and I hope your
Thank
school
you.
blossoms into multiple has all over like that, just the foundational ideas start to spread because it's very important. And
Yeah.
for the shit.
Well, I'll just end with saying that we're about to move, and I'm just like trying to call in all of the good energy for this new space that we're gonna be in, because it feels a little scary to like grow. So I'm just pulling in your energy.
Bien
Thank you so much.
suerte. You got it, cuz.
Well, I hope we can talk soon. Thank you.
For the homies, peace and love. Until the next time. All right.